Hi there. This teaching video is about methods of doing ethnographic research. Ethnography, from the Greek word ethno and grapho, which means writing out a people, has a process of participant observation that comes to us from anthropology that has been imported into sociology, where we observe a people, a place, a meaning at a certain point in time. We record it and we write about it. Well, what are some of the methods that one might use that are important key terms in ethnographer? First, one would be a participant observer on a research field in that they would be there looking at certain phenomenon, certain behaviors, or language, linguistics, what people wear, what they smell, what the scene is like. And they record these on jot notes, home notes, and field notes. Jot notes are little tiny inscriptions that you make on small papers like a cheat sheet, or take camera notes, which is little short photographs, or audio notes where you speak into a phone. And what you do is with these short notes, you take them home, put them beside your computer, and then you write like mad to write out everything you saw, to record in memory. That writing out mad turns into organized field notes as you edit it based on codes, themes, and trends that you see coming out from your research. So participant observation isn't just random in going into a neighborhood looking at someone or something, or an action, or a space, or a geography. It is actually going with the intention of recording it to turn it into field notes. Another way to do qualitative ethnography is face-to-face interviews. You might choose to look at certain interactions people might have or certain ways they behave. One of my students was a nurse, and she was interested in how people had recovered from Hurricane Sandy. For those of you who are unaware, Hurricane Sandy hit New York a few years ago, and it destroyed numbers of homes on the shoreline of Brooklyn. And one of these neighborhoods was called Gravesend Beach. One of my students, a middle-aged, wonderful woman, she worked for the city of New York, and her responsibility was to see if the FEMA funds, which is the Federal Emergency Management Association funds, the emergency funds that came for people to rebuild their homes on Gravesend Beach, would actually be done, and whether the contractors were following through on the contracts that they had agreed to. Well, as she did her research, she was recognizing that, the jobs were not getting done, and she was helping to expose that there were several unscrupulous contractors on Long Island from the suburbs who had come into Gravesend Beach, created these building contracts, gotten the FEMA funds to rebuild these homes, but never finished the funds near the quality that had been expected, or even make some of them habitable. But that's not what the paper turned out to be about. In the face-to-face interviews that she did as part of her project, where she was interviewing people who had lost their homes, she wanted to hear the story. And numbers of them had relocated from their home to a neighbor's home. And as New Yorkers do when they get into a crisis, they all bond together and say, we're going to get through this somehow. And the neighbors in Gravesend Beach, what they did is they closed off living rooms, bedrooms, basements, and created living spaces for their neighbors, in the interest that this would be a short-term crisis management thing, and eventually they'll go back to their old homes. This research was being done 5 years after Hurricane Sandy, long after the homes should have been rebuilt. And here she was interviewing these families who had lost their homes at the dining room table of their neighbors, and to hear the story. The story was no longer about whether I get my home rebuilt or whether I have funds coming in from the government or a good contractor. The story was about lost dreams. My family. We never had a home to grow up in. Our kids have gotten old. So the face-to-face interview became pretty tragic. She was not used to this type of face-to-face interview because she was very much a city employee who was documenting things. But here, the documentation was not getting to the deeper part of the story, which was in the living rooms of people in the homes of the neighbors. So face-to-face interviews in ethnography can become a powerful tool to unearthing things that we don't otherwise know. Key consultants. Key consultants are people we get to know from a neighborhood or from a research project that will open doors to other people. Or they can give you information about your particular project. Now, one habit I have with my social research students is I like to assign projects in people's own neighborhoods because people are the best key consultants to their own places because they know them better than anybody else. But what about if you can't go to your own neighborhood? Well, I had to really depend on key consultants in my graduate work. I was studying high school football, and I was from Vancouver, British Columbia, and here I am in New York City. I don't understand this Friday night